Sean Strickland's UFC middleweight title reign ultimately proved to be short-lived as he suffered a split decision loss to Dricus Du Plessis in Saturday's UFC 297 headliner, seeing his reign come to its conclusion just about 4 months after it began back in September when he upset Israel Adesanya in a shocking and brilliant performance in Sydney. That fight was largely dominated by Strickland. This one against Du Plessis, absolutely not the case. This was a war, a competitive fight, back and forth over the course of 5 rounds. I do think watching it live from cage side that Du Plessis deserved the win, but there is certainly an argument for Strickland here too, and anyone saying that they thought he won, I don't really argue with them too much. I think there is certainly a case to be made there, but if you're using words like robbery and rigged and things like that, that is clearly not the case. This was just a close competitive fight. Blood in there, cuts in there, some big moments. I don't really have a big issue with how this was scored and how the result is. I'm sure Strickland and his team much more disappointed since they were the one that saw their reign come to an end. But for Strickland, I think this was a valuable fight for him once again. He did not turn on the gas as much as he should have in some of those middle rounds, and if he just did a little bit more, I think he is leaving Toronto still as the UFC middleweight champion. But I don't think this damaged his stock all that significantly, quite honestly. He has gained a lot of fanfare and a lot of traction in the sport in recent months, for better or worse. We don't need to get into thoughts on his character, his comments, all those kind of things here. This is more just about the fighting side of it and what makes sense for him next. And as much as he's going to want an immediate rematch, as much as there's maybe a case for that compared to some of the other contenders available out there, given how close this fight was, I just don't think he's going to get it. I think the UFC is probably going to move on to something else for Du Plessis for his first defense, probably Khamzat Chimaev or Israel Adesanya, whatever they can line up for him timing-wise. And for Strickland, maybe he goes back to the UFC Apex in Las Vegas and headlines a card there. I do think we might see a little bit of a break for him. He has probably made a good amount of money in these past 2 fights. He said this turnaround, even from September, was a little much for him, and he was going to want a break after. So I could see him taking some time to recalibrate, enjoy life a little bit, and then come back maybe later on in the year. And maybe on his side, it's a rematch with Du Plessis if Dricus defends his title against someone else in the meantime. But I don't think that's going to be the fight the UFC sets up between them next. So we'll see what happens. I do think Strickland has a lot of fun fights still available for him. I think the winner of Robert Whittaker and Paulo Costa next month at UFC 298 would make a ton of sense for him. If they end up booking Du Plessis versus Adesanya, maybe you do Strickland versus Khamzat Chimaev. If they go the other way and do Du Plessis and Chimaev, maybe you do a rematch with Adesanya. But I think in terms of a fresh fight that kind of makes sense for the division, I do like the winner of Whittaker and Costa. So Strickland, I'm sure he's going to be taking a little time here. This one, as I said, don't think damaged his stock too badly, and I do think there's a chance we see him fighting for the UFC middleweight title again in the future. But if not, the Sean Strickland title reign, albeit short, was certainly something that's going to stand out for better or worse in the minds of the MMA world.